Okay, hello, welcome. This is our podcast. I don't know if we should even call this a podcast.
It is. It's a podcast.
It's a podcast. Okay. I mean, I would say something more akin to like video essay, maybe, but I don't know. Um, so this is gonna be about anger and willpower in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and how that's a reflection of a feminist theory by Audre Lorde. So obviously we're gonna be doing Avatar: The Last Airbender, which came out in 2005, and it's like still super duper popular. Everybody loves the show. We love the show. Here's one of my stickers because I love Avatar, and I only love it because of Maeve.
Yeah, I love it a lot. I've seen it like over 60 times. I just kept watching it since 2020 when it came out on Netflix. And I think so many people started watching it because of COVID and like everyone was stuck inside. So I started watching it too. And it was just the best thing I've ever seen.
I think I might be able to like go into my Snapchat memories from like 2020 and find filters over top
Yeah.
of like pictures I took of the show while Maeve was watching it. Um, but I'm a junior in college. This is my final for my feminist theory class, which I'm taking with Professor Ali, who is an amazing professor. If anybody is interested in feminist theory or women and gender studies, it's very interesting, and I love it very much. And I also love Avatar, so I thought that this was a really good thing to do my final on. Maeve looks super interested.
I am. I'm excited to start talking about
Oh,
it.
okay. Do you actually want to start?
No.
Oh, you don't want to start? Oh, okay. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is that Avatar is obviously a very good example of like feminism in media, feminism in TV, and also just progressivism in general. I read this amazing dissertation by somebody called Dara Poizner about like progressivism. I have to find the actual name. It's called The Last Airbender as a Moral Educator by Dara Poizner. And it basically explains how Avatar: The Last Airbender introduces socially progressive values to children in a way that they can understand and enjoy. And it successfully makes viewers morally liberal. And then the author Poizner goes on to focus on like how the values demonstrated in the show, like racial diversity and family structures and gender and feminism and more. It helps like show the dismantling of systems of oppression in the show, and then argues that the role of feminism is one of these values of dismantling, and it helps instill liberal values in its viewers, even though the patriarchy isn't as prominent in the show as it is in real life.
Especially, I think, being made in the early 2000s, it was such a good thing for kids to watch and understand, and its ideas are still important now,
Oh,
even 20
absolutely.
years later.
Yeah, it's still it's still able to put these things, I don't know, instill these values in viewers. And especially for like a children's show. Like Avatar was, I guess, meant to be a children's show. I wouldn't necessarily call it a children's show. I think that really it doesn't showcase everything that Avatar is just calling it a children's show.
Yeah, it's definitely a very good show for kids to watch, but it's also is
It's easy for
entertaining.
kids to
It's
understand.
entertaining for everyone because it deals with such mature topics.
I remember being in the car. I don't know where we were, but we were with our cousins,
I
and
remember
they
this too.
and they were watching Avatar: Last Airbender on DVD, and they were talking about how much they loved it. And then, years later, you ended up getting into it, and you were what? You were like 11 or 12 years old when you first got into it, and you'll be 18 this year, which is, my God. Okay, Unk.
Yeah.
um, but my main thesis is going to be about Katara and her role as a feminist in the Avatar universe. You can honestly go online and find a lot on Katara as a feminist and how she relates to feminist values. Um, as well as many other characters in the show. Like Toph also exhibits feminist values. I would say Suki um, exhibits feminist values as well. What about you? What would you?
Yeah, I think all the female characters are really good examples
Yeah,
of feminism. Suki in particular is good because she is among all the powerful women in the show, but she also is the one who transforms Sokka's
that's
views
right.
about thinking that, like, his masculine views, thinking that women can't fight and that men are better fighters and women should be cooking and cleaning. But
Yeah,
Suki proves that women can fight just as well too.
and then she actually teaches him how to
Hmm.
fight. Right? She
Yeah.
teaches him with what? What does she use? A fan? She
Yeah.
uses a fan, which is super cool, by the way. But I haven't. I don't remember the last time I sat through and like watched the show. So we're gonna have to do that together at some point. But yeah. Okay, so as we get into this, to understand feminism, it is important to understand that there are different feminist theories which kind of act as subcategories in feminism. And my main point in making this is that I was particularly drawn to a theory that was popularized by feminist Audre Lorde, who described herself as Black lesbian mother warrior poet. Um, a lot of her work is based in intersectionality, which is women understanding one another as well as a collective, and she uses her experiences as a queer and Black woman um, to shape her viewpoints and beliefs about intersectionality. So yeah, she focuses on the understanding of women as a collective and not just white women understanding white women, which I know is very ironic that we're doing the talking for this, but I still think, I'm queer. I don't know what you want to identify as, but it's good to understand intersectionality and understand all women and all people. Feminism isn't just inherently women, it's everybody. So, this theory comes that I'm going to be using is coming from her uh, her work called The Uses of Anger, which I downloaded for you so that you could read. I'm not sure if you were able to look into it. But in this work, Lord focuses on using anger as a tool for progress rather than one for division. And she describes to readers what it means to be a feminist woman of color and empathizes with other women of color who are angry at the way the world views and treats them. And she writes on page 2, your fear of anger will teach you nothing, expressing that anger is not, in fact, just a simple emotion. It's a radical one. And she poses a question of who benefits from separation caused by anger, and then she explains it as the white man. The white man is who's going to benefit from, white feminists not understanding Black feminists and queer feminists not understanding another type of feminist. It's, feminists have to work together is the kind of thing that she's saying. um but as feminists fight for their equality, many white women in particular don't include topics of racism, which affect their sisters of color. And therefore, women of color have to not only fight against a racist patriarchy, but other women who are racist or ignorant towards racism without even being knowledgeable on the topic. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm the most knowledgeable person on this. I think it would be wonderful to have, somebody else here who could help us speak on this a little bit better, but there's only so much that we can do while I'm doing my finals and while we're in our hometown. But at the end of the day, what Lord is explaining is that the white man is staying in power and he's benefiting from racism in feminist spaces. And then this goes over into many forms of media, Avatar included, and the discourse between minority groups is, I would say, what helps keep the Fire Nation in power a little bit. What would you say
Yeah,
about that?
especially with because the Earth Kingdom is a very strong nation and they are pretty much all intact. But especially with the water tribes, since they're so far apart, one at the North Pole and one at the South Pole,
And then also the
it
swamps, they have
yeah.
those. Yeah,
And it's just so the especially the Southern Water Tribe was just very secluded and they didn't have the resources, and that's how the Fire Nation was able to attack the South so much and take all of their waterbenders except for Katara, which they realized later on, but
Yeah, but they didn't end up, taking her. If you've
yeah.
watched the show. But I would say that this kind of reflects what Lorde is trying to explain with her theory of, anger being used as a tool, where she's explaining that the white man is going to stay in power if the minorities are not able to come together as a whole. So Lorde actually goes on to say that anger should be, quote, expressed and translated into action, and that anger is ultimately a, quote, powerful source of energy serving progress and change. And when action is forged by the flames of anger, Lorde would agree, shit gets done. And I would say, that's exactly what Katara does. And she translates her anger from being a minority into action, which ultimately helps her and her friends dismantle the hatred of the Fire Nation and lead them to victory.
Yeah, her motive or her motivations to show people that she can fight, and she often says to people that she is the last waterbender of the Southern Tribe, showing that her anger is like pushing her to be a better fighter.
Especially when she also has anger from the grief that she faces, with the loss of her mother and the fact that her father isn't really present all the time because I don't even remember what he's out doing.
Helping fight
But
in the war.
helping fight, yeah, but he's not there for both of his kids. And Sokka, I would like to get into Sokka later, so I'll put a hold on that. But yeah, so anger with Katara is one of the first things that we see when the show starts. And that actually is going back into what Maeve was talking about with Suki teaching Sokka that, it's that girls can do more than cook and clean. Um, but Katara is pissed off, if I may say, that Sokka is sexist. I don't exactly remember what he says, but he is saying some really sexist things, and it pisses Katara off. And this is literally in the first like 5 minutes of the show, and she gets so angry that she uses waterbending without even realizing she's doing it, and she cracks open the iceberg that Aang has been stuck in for 100 years, and there would be no show without Katara being angry. There would be nothing. But she's actually a really interesting character because of her combined masculine and feminine traits, and I'm wondering if you would agree with that. She's regarded as motherly or maternal, towards Aang, which is why a lot of people say like, oh, they shouldn't be together, which is stupid because they're both kids. But regardless, she has masculine and feminine traits. Dara Poizner actually touches on this in her dissertation, and the author describes her actually as a, quote, complex, balanced character. She demonstrates womanly virtues without being stereotypically feminine and male qualities without being one-dimensional. Some of these stereotypically masculine qualities are undeniably her anger, although it can be argued that her emotions are more feminine in nature. And this demonstrates the blending of masculinity and femininity in the show, which is reflecting real life, where men are often seen as angry while women are just viewed as emotional. And there's no nuance to either of those things. It's just kind of sticking a stupid label on it. But regardless, Katara kind of combines both of those traits, and she moves forward. And I put this very poetically so that Maeve would like it. She moves forward like the water she bends, and like Audre Lorde advises women of color to do. So she uses this combination of masculine and feminine traits, as well as her complex emotions, to power her determination throughout the show. And that ends up with her being a stronger bender and woman overall, I would say. So the first thing is season 1, episode 18, Master Paku in the Northern Water Tribe. That's the biggest thing. What would you like to say about that whole episode?
I think that her I don't even know what I was about to say. She gets especially angry in this case because of it. A lot of her anger comes from the death of her mother and from the Fire Nation, but this is more of a moral anger where she wants justice. She sees that Master Paku, and the culture of the Northern Water Tribe is sexist because they don't let female waterbenders fight, they only let them heal. And she challenges Paku to a duel, knowing that he's a master and she's not going to win, but she wants to prove herself and show that women can also fight. And she does end up proving herself, which allows Master Paku to see her in a different light and open up the possibility for other female waterbenders to fight and train with him.
Which I think is especially moving because she doesn't win the duel. Paku wins the duel, but she still is able to showcase and prove her point that she is, a worthy bender and that she should be taught under Paku with Aang. So there was a wonderful article that I read by somebody named Franca María Amongero Noriega, and I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but it's her dissertation called Unveiling Colonial Ideologies. And she basically describes that Katara's fight with Master Paku in the first season showcases Katara's mastery of waterbending and also her determination to be a waterbender. And she writes, quote, "This episode not only showcases Katara's agency and determination to fight against unjust systems, but also highlights her grandmother's role in challenging oppressive norms." And so this not only supports the claim that Katara's anger is what fuels her to become a better bender and in turn a better feminist, but it also, the show also exhibits this feminist determination through other characters like her grandmother. And we later go on to see that her grandmother left the Northern Water Tribe to escape sexist practices like arranged marriages, and she was going to be in an arranged marriage with Master Paku. But Noriga pushes this idea that feminism isn't just a common virtue in many of the female characters, but it's kind of like a family tree in the fact that it's what connects them and makes them as a whole stronger. Another important episode. These three episodes that I'm going to talk about are actually ones that are really heavily talked about in feminist spheres and literature spheres, I would say, because of the absolute. I don't know, the absoluteness. I don't even know if that's a word, but how much feminism there is in the show and with Katara's character specifically. So season 3, episode 8, Katara is with Hama. She meets Hama for the first time, and Hama doesn't return in later episodes, does she?
No.
But yeah, her and her friends meet Hama for the first time, and I'm wondering if you could do a little explanation on what this episode is about.
They meet Hama and they find out that she is a waterbender that's living among the Fire Nation. She's hiding, and Katara really connects with her because Hama was also from the Southern Water Tribe and was kidnapped by the Fire Nation along with all of the other Southern Waterbenders, and they were held captive. And Hama found a way to escape by bending the water inside of people's bodies. And she teaches this to Katara, but Katara rejects this idea because her anger is really conflicted in this episode, especially because she feels for Hama being a waterbender, especially from the Southern Water Tribe, but she acknowledges that what Hama has been taking other innocent members of the town that she lives in the Fire Nation.
She's an innkeeper.
Yeah, she's been kidnapping them and hiding them inside a mountain using bloodbending. And Katara knows that this is wrong, but she feels bad for Hama because she understands her position, but she knows that what she's doing, Katara knows that what Hama is doing is unjust. And so she ends up fighting her, but Hama uses bloodbending against Katara, which forces Katara to use it as well, which is something Katara never wants to do because it takes away someone's autonomy and forces them against their will.
And Hama uses bloodbending against Aang and Sokka, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think, where Katara is like, she obviously has drawn the line, but that's kind of where she was like, okay, like shit, I actually have to do something about this. And I would say that anger that she's feeling anger in the moment, obviously, but she uses that to fuel her determination to get her friends, her loved ones out of this situation. So when I was reading Noriega's work, she actually kind of talks about anti-feminism in Avatar, in unveiling colonial ideologies, and quote, by the end of The Puppet Master, which is the episode that we're talking about, Hama is perceived as an evil person whose years in prison affected her mental well being and forced her to learn bloodbending in order to escape her imprisonment and take revenge on innocent Fire Nation civilians. In the case of Azula, though her evil intentions and methods have caused harm to many people, which she reflects on when she says, my own mother thought I was a monster. She was right, of course, but it still hurt. The decision of turning her into a mentally ill character deprives her from full self control over her own decisions. These two stories perpetuate the idea that women cannot act voluntarily with violence, but their decisions are rather influenced by external factors, such as a social circumstance or mental illness. So I felt that was definitely I should definitely discuss that in this podcast video essay, um, because I want to focus on Katara and I want to focus on other characters and how they showcase feminism and how the show is good at showcasing feminism, but it's also not really. There are points where it's not good at talking about these female characters like Hama and like Azula. And so I'm just wondering specifically from you, how do we address characters like this, especially in a show that is virtually very progressive with its female characters? How do we address Hama and how do we address Azula even?
I think that I don't think that there's anything wrong with creating these evil characters
Yeah.
being women because it just shows that along with men, women are capable of exactly the same things. And in media, women can be villains too, and it doesn't always have to be like it's not always the men who are the most violent because when it comes to the circumstances that Hama and both Azula were in, it doesn't matter their gender. It depends on how they were treated and especially Azula, how she was raised and the circumstances and trauma that they went through.
So, I mean, understanding a little bit of like Lord's ideas on anger and using it as a tool, how do you think Azula and Hama could fit in with that? Do you think they do, or do you think it's not really like how do you feel about that?
I think Hama uses her anger as a tool. It it's what fueled her to create a new form of bending and but her anger was she
Like
didn't
it was a little bit misguided, would you
yeah
say? Yeah.
yeah and it wasn't just anger that fueled her, it was just the need to survive because she was trapped in a cage. They barely fed them, barely gave them any water to drink. They had them chained up. So she needed to survive and she was angry at the Fire Nation, which is why she ended up kidnapping people after she escaped.
And what about Azula in like Azula's case?
Azula, she is also an angry character, but I don't necessarily think it's her anger that fuels her bending, or I think it comes from her pride and her desire to be better than other people.
And like I guess maybe her desire to please her father.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really important to talk about, definitely. But my third episode that I want to talk about is Katara versus Yon Ra. Is that how you pronounce his name? Yon
Mhm.
Ra. It's season 3, episode 16. Katara basically goes to find her mother's murderer. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about this.
The whole episode is based on Katara and Zuko's relationship, which is why she goes to see the man who killed her father, because she's been so angry at Zuko the whole time that he's trying to make amends, and he has with everyone part of the group except for Katara, because she's just so angry at him, and the only way that he thinks that he can prove himself to her is going to find the man that killed her father. I mean, killed her mother. And so they find the group that he was part of when the Southern Water Tribe was attacked, and they find that Yon Ra is not there. So they discover him. He's retired, living with his mother, and when she finds him, she thinks that she's going to kill him. She's ready to kill him, but in the end, she lets go and decides that revenge is not the best answer. But she doesn't forgive him. She's still angry at him, but she does forgive Zuko.
And one of the important things I think to mention from earlier in this episode is that Aang actually advises her to face this man. And then he says, quote, "But when you do, please don't choose revenge. Let your anger out and then let it go. Forgive him." And she doesn't forgive him, but she does forgive Zuko, which is a really important part of her character development. She is the one who has been like the hardest on Zuko since he's joined the group. And like, you know, obviously, I don't blame her for not wanting to forgive him, but it's like a very important part of her character development, her forgiving Zuko and having this I guess newfound sense of friendship kind of with him, and like he's actually part of their group and she is cool with that. So her anger, I think earlier in the episode, correct me if I'm wrong, but her anger leads to her harming a man who is innocent in the death of her mother. Don't they find somebody first, and it's not Yanra. And Zuko is like, "Oh shit, like this is not the right guy." Because he had said earlier, "I can help you find this man." And then they find the wrong man. And then, Katara obviously hurts. I don't know if she hurts him, but she definitely traumatizes him.
She used his bloodbending against him to control him, which is something that she swore to never do.
With Hama, and she swore after that episode, like, I'm never gonna do this again, because she was so upset by it. And then she goes on to use it later because she's really that angry. But in, like, in a split second decision, Katara heeds Aang's advice, as well as the advice of Audre Lorde, I might say, and she channels her anger and she transfers it into forgiveness. Maybe not for Yan Ra. She lets him go. He's fine. Um, maybe not emotionally, but he's fine. But she transfers it into forgiveness, and she uses that for Zuko. That's like the most. That was like one of the most, I think, not interesting. Interesting isn't the right word, but like maybe influential parts of the show, in my opinion, when we can see her forgiving him and seeing this. Um and then, with this talk of anger and redemption and forgiveness, maybe Zuko would be like a good character to talk about a little bit, because his whole thing is that he's angry. And that's something that people forget about Katara a lot, I feel, because people say, oh, she's just maternal towards Aang, and she's like the mother of the group, and she's like the leader of the group. But her whole character is formed around this anger that she feels towards, being the last waterbender and losing her mother and not having her father. And it's the same thing with Zuko. He's angry. He is angry at his father, and there's probably some anger towards his mother for leaving as well. He's angry at his sister. He's angry for being banished. He's angry at Iroh because Iroh's trying to help, and he's an emotionally distraught teenager who doesn't understand that. Um, but he is also a character who's notoriously led by anger, and I'm kind of wondering how you feel about that in comparison to Katara and like other characters.
Zuko is especially angry, and I think it's very apparent throughout the entire show, but especially in the final season when he does join their group, and he joins because there's no one else who can teach Aang firebending, but Aang needs to learn firebending to defeat the Fire Lord.
And
But
Zuko wants that. Zuko
yeah,
wants the Fire Lord to be defeated.
yeah, so he joins their group, but as he's trying to teach Aang, he realizes that his firebending just isn't as strong anymore, and he doesn't understand why. But after visiting the dragons, which were the original firebenders who taught people to firebend, he realizes that when he was against Aang and wanted to get his honor back from his father, his firebending came from anger. And once he joined the group and after he confronted his father and wanted to be on the good side, he realized that he wasn't angry anymore. So his fuel was so small. He needed to find another way to fuel his firebending to become even more powerful than he was before.
And I guess he kind of learns a little bit, maybe inadvertently, but he learns a little bit from Iroh, who it was regarded as the Dragon of the West. He was a very fearsome war general. He was part of the taking of Ba Sing Se, or the Earth Kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
and all that. He was a lot of people I see talking about online, being like, why would they forgive him? Like he was a really gross, terrible person. But he kind of has the same like awakening. He has a very similar awakening to Zuko when his son dies. And he doesn't really use that anger anymore. He uses more than anger. He's in touch with his other emotions, and then Zuko gets in touch with his other emotions as well. We don't really see him being anything other than angry in season 1. And season 2, we see that anger still, but we see a little bit more. And then in season 3, the anger is still there, but like he is not driven solely by anger. He is more than just an angry teenager at that point. Traveling a little bit away from the episodes themselves that I wanted to talk about, the most interesting and important part of this is comparing Avatar as a whole and Lord's theory. And her lens helps viewers understand the show as well as the world around them, and coming to terms with anger and using it towards personal growth and outside impact. And like I mentioned before, it's more than just Avatar is more than just a kids show. um Katara's lessons that she learns, they help her and they help viewers. And she and the other characters like Zuko and like Aang and like Toph, and I think I have it written in my notes to talk a little bit about it later. Um, their anger and their ability to be in touch with their emotions is definitely very influential towards the viewers. I don't know if you would be able to speak on that, because you were 11 or 12 when you started watching this show. And do you think that this show has helped you like develop your emotional uh intelligence in a way?
I think that the show is just very good for being relatable and showing people that their emotions are normal, and especially girls. Young girls often are looked at as emotional and not angry, and their anger isn't represented in media a lot. But the female characters in the show, and especially Katara, are very good for representing young girls and their anger and emotions, especially when Katara is angry at Zuko. She kind of displaces her anger for from the grief of the loss of her mother. She displaces it onto Zuko, which is such a raw human emotion that a lot of women don't get representation on.
And I would say that this show, like I mentioned earlier, it really effectively teaches Lord's lens in a way that is digestible for viewers, and it's also reminiscent of Poizner's article, ATLA as a moral educator. And I might mention that Avatar actually kind of somewhat contradicts Lord's point, a little bit, because she focuses on intersectionality between race and gender, and a little bit of sexuality. Um, but correct me if I'm wrong, but race is never really mentioned in Avatar. What is mentioned, however, is nationalities and cultures, and the Water Tribes, the Earth Kingdom, the Fire Nation, the Air Nomads, and each nation is based on some real world cultures. You know, maybe anything about that you would want to mention?
I know that the air nomads are based on Buddhist monks. The Earth Kingdom has roots in China and a little bit of imperial Japan. The water tribes get a lot of inspiration from Inuit people and native people. The Fire Nation is more Japan
And I
than.
I actually found something from Baron News, where they talk a little bit about some of the influences. So the water tribes are like influenced by Inuit and Yupik cultures. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. There's also Native American and Australian Aboriginal elements to it. The Earth Kingdom is largely based on China, with Japanese influence for the Kyoshi Islanders, and the Northern African Tuareg, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, influence on desert sandbenders. Fire Nation is largely Imperial Japan, so think 1920s to 1940s Japan, um, as well as some Chinese and South Asian elements. And then the Air Nomads are Buddhists in Tibet, Sri Lanka, some Hindu influences, Shaolin influence. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right either. Oof. But it's a wonderful melting pot of many cultures, and even some that were not mentioned by me or by you or by the source that I found. But that this is just going to say culture is extremely important in Avatar, and many nations face extermination and genocide by the imperialist Fire Nation. And the anger and desire to defeat Fire Lord Ozai and his forces is what brings Aang, Katara, Sokka, and Toph and Zuko together in the first place. And they have this pride in their culture and their nationality, which is present in Avatar even if race isn't. So even though they don't really touch on the topics of race, they do touch on the topics of culture, which reflects Lord's lens. And also, intersectionality can be found within the complexities of bending and non-bending in Avatar, and each type of bending is associated with a nationality. So the Fire Nation is the Firebenders, and so on and so forth. Um, they're all associated. They all have their ties, and that's what creates the nations in the first place. Is um, the differences between benders. But the Avatar bends all, even when they are born into a specific nation. They circulate through the nations. I'm not sure which nation it starts with or which bender it starts with, but it circles through all of the nations at some point. So, I mean, Katara's anger with having no one to guide her bending, and her bending being the reason her mother was killed, that's definitely a type of intersectionality in the show that Lorde might be able to agree with. What would you say about something about like that? She doesn't really have like a guide to help bend her once everybody else is gone.
Oh, I think that that's why Katara's interaction with Master Paku is so important, because her whole life she's hasn't had anyone to teach her waterbending, and she just wants someone to guide her and help her. And throughout the first season, before they get to the Northern Water Tribe, she is trying to learn how to bend water, and she goes as far to steal a waterbending scroll
That's
to
right.
learn waterbending because she has no one to teach her.
She's
And
just kind of doing all this on her own.
yeah,
Which is it goes to show how powerful she is. She's a really powerful bender, and she's able to like kind of teach herself in the beginning as well as when she gets the scroll. But
right.
not to cut you off or anything.
But she finally finds someone in the Northern Water Tribe who can teach her, and she's so excited by this idea. She's so enthralled to learn with him and learn alongside Aang, which she had been trying to do previously. She tried to teach Aang waterbending, but his ability surpassed hers, and that just made her even more angry.
Yeah, but then when she leaves the Northern Water Tribe, doesn't Paku say something about like you can teach him on your own now or something like that?
Yeah, he mentions to Aang that he should be calling her Master Katara because during her time with him, she's mastered waterbending. And Aang is obviously a prodigy as he is the Avatar, but he often lets the idea that he's a prodigy get in the way of him actually learning because he thinks that he's already so great that he doesn't have to practice, but he really does.
And that's a good segue into the next point that I wanted to bring up, which is Aang's anger towards learning bending styles. And you know, his anger from learning, not being able to like fully learn all of these things like in such a short period of time, I think is what allows him to be such a strong bender in all of these categories later on, is the fact that this anger drives him, this like feeling of being upset that he can't immediately get everything right away. And it was which was the element that was especially hard for him to learn? It was earthbending, right?
He struggled a lot with earthbending because earth is the natural opposite of air, and his personality is very similar to air and the other nomads, whereas earthbending is more tough and rooted, which is so opposite from the air nomads that are always moving around and changing locations, and they're very light, whereas earth is so
Heavy.
rough.
Yeah, yeah. But then like looking at him and his fight with Fire Lord Ozai, that's that's incredible to me how he was able to learn, maybe not master, but learn all of these elements within literally like a year.
Mhm.
It's a year or less than a year
Yeah.
even, of him learning all four elements. He already knows, you know, airbending, but the other three elements, and on top of that keeping up with airbending. And he uses that to defeat Ozai. And he does that without even killing Ozai, which is upholding his beliefs as an air nomad, which is very, very good. Would you say anything more about his anger towards learning other bending styles?
I think that his anger is very different from a
Oh,
lot of the other
yeah.
characters, because a lot of his anger comes from being angry at himself for leaving the other airbenders. And
Yeah, that's actually really that's a good point. He doesn't really feel angry towards anyone else.
that's also why his anger towards himself restricts him from learning firebending, because he originally found someone who wasn't associated with the Fire Nation that could teach him firebending. And when he had fire for the first time, he hurt Katara accidentally, which made him more angry at himself and made him not even just hesitant, like he was completely closed off to the idea of learning firebending. He was going to fight the Fire Lord without learning firebending because he was so upset at himself and angry for hurting Katara that he never wanted to be a firebender ever again.
And I definitely think that that speaks also on the cultures in Avatar and how he feels this anger towards himself the way that he does because of the um the beliefs of the air nomads versus maybe everybody else. They're not the air nomads are extremely like spiritualistic. They're correct me if I'm wrong, but all of the basically all of the air nomads that are born are benders because being a bender is connected to your spirituality or like your parents' spirituality. Um, so if they're spiritual, you're going to be a bender, but if they're not spiritual, you might not be a bender.
Mm-hmm.
Which I wonder. That's kind of I guess the case with Sokka then, because his father, Hakoda isn't a bender, is he? And their mother wasn't a bender. Katara ended up being like blessed with the gift of bending somehow, and Sokka wasn't.
Right.
Um, and then I guess that's a good way to bring up his anger, his frustration, I guess at not being a bender. But he ends up really using that anger to his advantage to become a strong fighter without bending. Would you be able to? Is there anything you would want to say about that?
He, I want to say it's kind of like a jealousy that he feels towards the other characters being able to help out so much using their bending, whereas there's a lot of stuff that he can't do, like earlier in the episode where he learns sword fighting. He becomes so upset because he sees that his friends are able to put out massive fires and save so many people because they have the ability to control the elements, whereas Sokka doesn't. And he's angry because he feels like he's not able to help people and protect people the way that he should, because he looks a lot at his father and wants to be like his father, who's the leader of the Southern Water
The chief
Tribe.
of the tribe, yeah.
And
And he has a lot of like expectations, I guess, that are really put onto him, especially because he's the oldest son of the chief. And I'm I'm wondering like do you think he feels like very overshadowed, especially with his sister being a bender and such a powerful one at that?
I think, yeah, I think so. He wants to be just as strong as everybody else, but he knows that there are limitations to his abilities because he's just not able to bend the way that all of his friends are.
Would you agree that his frustration helps him like be determined to be a better fighter?
Yeah, definitely. He uses that frustration to fight against a master swordbender and become a master himself because he wants to be at the same level as his friends and fight just as well as the rest of them.
And then later on in like the final episodes, it's him and Suki that commands that warship, right?
Yep, two non-benders end up taking down a whole fleet of Fire Nation warships.
Which is crazy, and it really goes to show how much Sokka has progressed. I see a lot of people being like, oh, Zuko has the best character development or Katara has the best character development, but everybody kind of forgets that Sokka also has this character development where he begins the show being this incredibly sexist and like closed-minded character, and we kind of only see him as like a comedic relief for a while, and then he is able to connect with his friends and he's able to flesh out his emotions a little bit more, and he talks to them later on about how he's like upset that he can't really do as much as they can because he's not a bender, when they're pretending to be Fire Nation citizens. But yeah, he starts the show off as that, and then he ends literally helping lead the defeat of the Fire Nation and Ozai's forces at like 15 or 16 years old.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned that he's not just sexist but also closed-minded, because there's points that don't have to do with sexism that just show how much he's grown from the beginning to end. In the very first couple of episodes, he's even skeptical of bending. He says that it's magic.
He says that literally like in the first episode with Katara when they're talking about her bending.
Yeah.
And she's trying to show him her bending, and he's trying to catch a fish or something, and he's all like, oh, this is hokey pokey, stuff like that. And then it's crazy to me because he's not only able to come to terms with the fact that yes, it's a real thing, but then he addresses his emotions and how he's upset and frustrated that he isn't a bender, and then also later on comes to terms with the fact that he doesn't need to be a bender to be a skilled fighter. So I'm actually wondering if there were any other examples of like anger and determination in the show that you wanted to talk about that I didn't really speak on. Maybe Toph. She's also, a really big member of the gang. I'm not sure if you would be able to speak on her and like her frustration and how that, if she has a frustration that really pushes her to help fight and like use that.
Toph's frustration mostly comes from her relationship with her parents, because she was born blind, and so her parents believe that she will never be capable of being a skilled bender because she is handicapped. But she ends up using this idea that her parents place on her she wants to prove that she can be a powerful bender. So she learns from the Badger Moles, which were the first earthbenders. She learns from them who the Badger Moles are also blind, so she can relate to them and learn so quickly from them. And she uses this frustration to be such a powerful bender and defy her parents.
And then she beats grown men at their own game.
When she's 12 years old, she beats fully grown, like huge sumo wrestler, muscly.
What was
big
the one
men.
guy's name? The one that Sokka liked.
The boulder.
The boulder. She beats the boulder, and he's like this big tough guy.
Huge guy.
And what does she call him? The pebble?
Yeah.
And I also actually that's also a good thing to talk about with Sokka, is that he's like really loves these big scary muscle men. And he's like, yeah, I want the boulder to win. I want the boulder to win. And he doesn't want Toph to win.
Yeah, he's like, there's no way this little blind girl is gonna beat the boulder.
And then she does. Like twice.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, and also her frustration. This isn't really anger, but her frustration. She ends up getting kidnapped by these two guys who are paid by her parents to kidnap her and bring her back to them. She uses that frustration when she's trapped to create a new form of bending. She's stuck in a metal cage.
So that she can't earthbend out of it.
Yeah. She's stuck in a metal cage, and she uses this frustration to channel her bending and create a new form of bending, metal bending, and escape.
And she escapes, and what does she say? She's like,
I am the greatest earthbender in the world! Don't you two dunderheads ever forget it!
I love her. Oh my gosh, she's one of my favorite characters in the whole show. I love her so much.
She's awesome.
through these characters and other characters, this show really helps depict what anger can accomplish when it's recognized, when you or when the characters recognize their anger and then come to terms with it and then utilize it as a tool rather than a means of hatred. And I'm kind of thinking, that was what kind of set Hama apart from everybody else, is that she used her anger to be hateful, which I can't say I blame her for doing. I would be angry and hateful at what happened to her as well. But Lorde actually goes into the fact that there is a difference between hatred and anger, and you need to channel your anger in a way that will not allow you to be hateful, and instead use that to progress yourself. She encourages women of color to be in touch with their anger, and that will allow them to find out what the outcome of utilizing anger can be. But in Avatar, the show and the directors and producers and everybody associated with Avatar, they help accurately illustrate what exactly those outcomes of using your anger can be. I'm wondering, since you're studying for your APUSH exam, would you say that nothing good has ever been accomplished without anger?
I think that there are so many examples of anger being used as a positive good, especially in right now we're learning about the civil rights movements, and people were so angry with how they were being treated that they did something about it. And so much has changed in our society when between uh all races, but especially black people during the civil rights movement. So much has changed because of their anger.
Yeah, especially the anger of women.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a lot of nuance in the fact that women were definitely overshadowed in the civil rights movement, but they really helped. They were the ones who brought it to fruition. But I guess we could say that Avatar kind of inspires new generations to create waves of action that change the trajectory of not only their lives but their societies. And I'm wondering, we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but would you say that Avatar has inspired you to put your thoughts and emotions into action to solve real world problems or just problems in your life?
Yeah, I think so. I think especially with certain characters, like in TV shows, when you get really involved with them, there's usually a character or couple that you really relate to. Since I first started watching the show, I've always related to Katara especially. I think it's a lot has to do with her relationship with her father and her anger and in that situation that has made me relate to her the most. But the way she handles herself has just, even though she's a fictional character, her emotions are so real and the way she deals with them is so real and relatable that it makes me admire her, and I look up to her in a way.
Because I remember when you first started watching this show, she was like your favorite character. Maeve, like, she was like obsessed with Katara, and not like in a bad way, but Katara was. I can see it in you now how Katara as a character and how maybe even other TV shows have influenced you into the person that you've become. Like, you were young when you started watching this show, and now you're getting ready to apply to colleges in the fall. Like, you're like a woman.
Almost an adult.
You're almost an adult. But yeah, like, especially at 11 or 12 years old, however old you were, characters that are influential are more than just characters. And I guess I could sit here and say that, even throughout my young adulthood, I just turned 20 about a week ago, but like even now, characters are still characters from TV shows are still influencing me in the way that I do things, the way that I think about things, the way that I approach things. I would say Avatar definitely has been one of those, even though I'm not as into it as you are. Miss 60 times, more than 60 times watching this. But I guess the overall takeaway from this is that anger is power, and Lorde would agree with that. I think we could both say that Katara would agree with that, and other characters from Avatar would probably agree with that. So before we finish, I did kind of want to talk about Korra, Legend of Korra, a little bit. I have never watched Legend of Korra. I've seen clips of it online. I know that I'm a bad fan for not watching it, but I haven't seen it, so I'm not really one to talk about anger and feminism in Korra. But what would you be able to say anything about that, like, particularly?
I think that even if you haven't seen Korra, it wouldn't be that hard to talk
Yeah.
about, because her anger and her personality is so similar to Zuko in Avatar, and especially because personality heavily influences how someone bends and what elements they bend. Korra, being the Avatar, even though she was born in as a waterbender, she relies mostly on fire bending, because fire is so it's the closest to her own personality. And similar to how Aang, as an airbender, struggles with earthbending, Korra struggles with airbending because it's so different from her personality. And she it makes her angry, just how Aang was angry that he couldn't learn earthbending. Korra was angry that she couldn't airbend, and a lot of her anger is also similar to Aang, where she's angry at herself. She ends up getting poisoned, and she's basically on leave for 3 years. She's not being the Avatar and helping the world as she is supposed to be, and that makes her angry at herself, because she goes from being paralyzed to basically having to learn everything. She has to learn to walk again, how to bend again, and it makes her so angry that she ends up running away, because she doesn't want to face the rest of the world, who is also angry at her for leaving, and her approval rating is so low.
But yeah, so would you say that, I guess, that makes her more powerful by the end of it? Would you say that influences her in terms of being a feminist?
Korra is also another really good character to look at through a feminist lens, because, as I said before, she's so similar to Zuko, but she's treated by the fandom so differently. People always call her a bad avatar and compare her to Aang, but her anger and her personality is so similar to Zuko, where Zuko is praised for his redemption arc, but Korra is looked down upon for just being a person. And it just shows how differently men and women are treated in society, even though they are exhibiting the same emotions and the same rage. And she has basically she goes through the same redemption that Zuko does, when after she is poisoned and she leaves, she has to find herself again and find a new fuel for her bending, just like Zuko had to find a new fuel that was different from rage.
I'm so glad that I that I have you here to talk about this, because I never would have been able to discuss that. I don't know Korra. So I'm actually really glad I never even knew that. I never even knew that. So that's crazy. But then more about Korra, and I guess the world in The Legend of Korra, the show. I see a lot of people online frustrated that Katara has been reduced to a healer. And because I haven't really seen Korra, I wouldn't be able to say much about that, but what would you say about that?
I think that it is upsetting. It's also like, I'm glad that she's remembered, but it is a little bit upsetting because now her legacy is something that she didn't really, not that she didn't want to be associated with it, but she didn't want to be seen as just a bender. When she was in the Northern Water Tribe, she didn't want to learn healing because she wanted to be a fighter. And it's upsetting because all of the other members of their group from Avatar have like statues and homages towards them and their fighting in the 100-Year War when they defeated the Fire Lord, but Katara doesn't get that. She
And
is
I think most of
called
those statues were put in place because of like the founding of new cities, but she wasn't really present or participating in founding a new city.
yeah.
But anyway, as you were saying,
Yeah, I think it's important that she is remembered as a healer, but it's also disappointing that that's all she's remembered as. She's not thought of as one of the greatest waterbenders.
of all time,
Yeah.
and she's, I guess, not really credited for her role in defeating Ozai and bringing down the Fire Nation as it was, which was built upon hate, and she and her friends are able to defeat it, I guess, through the power of friendship, through love. And I know that that's like a really cliche. That's really cliche, and it's a really annoying thing. And people are like, "Yes, we're gonna defeat it with the power of friendship." But that really is kind of what they do. It's they're able to
Yeah.
connect through their mutual anger, and maybe even if they're all angry at the Fire Nation, but they're also all angry at other things, and they're able to connect through their frustration as well as other emotions. They're able to discover and like relate to themselves and other characters. They're able to, I guess, come to terms with other emotions that they maybe wouldn't have before they were part of this group.
Yeah, they have a lot of shared vulnerability, which I think is important, especially within feminism, because, feminism doesn't only affect women. We need men and women to be able to come together to solve this issue. And it's important for men to get representation on issues like vulnerability. And a lot of guys feel that they can't be vulnerable because of the norms that society has placed on them. But the show, Avatar, shows that it's okay to be vulnerable and have these emotions, and for both men and women.
And I think that we see that especially with the men. We see kind of Aang and Iroh, I think, are really good examples of like men who are in touch with their emotions, whereas Zuko and Sokka are not really at the beginning. They're not in touch with their emotions. Zuko is really only in touch with his emotions of anger, which help fuel his bending, like you mentioned. Sokka kind of just laughs. He laughs the pain away,
Yeah.
kind of thing. He is the comedic relief. He wants to be funny. And he doesn't really like to talk about the fact that he's upset by things like his father leaving and his mother being gone, and the fact that he can't bend. But by the end of the show, they've all matured, definitely, beyond the ages that they are. Like when you look at 12 and 13-year-olds today, they're not going to be mature in the way that like Aang was, in the way that Katara was, and maybe that's because they're fictional characters. I know, but they were also kind of, I guess, forced to grow up and forced to come to terms with those emotions because of the world that they lived in.
I think Sokka is he's a lot more in touch with his masculine side, but as just human beings, we all have masculine and feminine traits, and Aang is a good example of a man who's much more in touch with his feminine and softer side than a lot of the other male characters.
And then, like I mentioned with Katara, she also exhibits these masculine traits, and it's so good and like nice to me that she's a woman who is in touch with her anger, and then we have her brother Sokka, who is a man who ends up being he's later on able to be more in touch with his vulnerability and his softer side. I think that a lot of that is brought out by the members of this group that they're in. Definitely by, I would say, Yue. He's able to come to terms with emotions a lot more than with Suki, and definitely with his sister. And like when they discuss the topic of their mother together, that's like really, it's always just very moving when they're able to discuss their mother and mourn her together, and they have this shared vulnerability. They have this shared experience of the loss of their mother, and while it's different for both of them because everybody processes grief and loss differently, I think it's a good thing that ties, they're kind of yin and yang in my eyes in terms of, and I know you're giggling because yin and yang is a very big thing in the show, and also probably because you think I'm stupid and a nerd.
No, it's just balance is literally the central point of the show. That's what the Avatar represents. The Avatar represents balance between all four nations, which is why,
as well as the spirit world and the living world.
Oh yeah, not just the living world, but also between two
realms.
Yeah.
The
Avatar is the bridge between everybody.
Yeah, and then that's like, I don't even know where I was going with that.
And also, in order to be balanced, you need to be in touch with all of your emotions.
Which maybe by the end of the show they're not all like, oh, we're all in touch with all of our emotions and blah blah blah. But they've matured. There has been significant character development for all of the main characters by the end of the show, which is incredible to me.
Yeah,
it really helps showcase like the point that Lorde is making.
That's what makes a show so good, is that they can show these negative sides of people and how people can change, how everyone's capable of change and redemption.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of the end of our little podcast. Do you have any final remarks?
I think that's it.
Do you think that's it?
Yeah.
We rate Avatar 10 out of 10. We think that you should
it's so worth it. It's
on Netflix. It's really good. I used to dog on Maeve because I thought she was a nerd for watching the show, and then I got into it and sorry. But then I got into it and it is so good. It doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter what you're into. Even like Alex, my friend who notoriously thinks he is more mature than he really is, and he doesn't like cartoons, and he makes fun of me for liking cartoons. He likes Avatar. Because Avatar is that good of a show.
You can really tell how much work and effort the creators put into the show with just how good it is. Everything makes sense. Everything fits. It's such a good show.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I guess that's it for us. Thank you for listening or watching our podcast. We actually didn't come up with a name for this. Do you think we should come up with a name for a podcast?
We're gonna be making more?
Maybe we can make more. Would you be down to make more?
Sure.
Okay. So we need to come up with a name. More Avatar. What would we come up with? We could talk about many things. We could talk about like Tyler Catastrophe.
Oh my god.
And like I could bring in some things that I've learned from my 2 years of being a college student.
Yeah.
I guess what should we name this?
Yeah, I don't know.
Something about us, I guess. I don't know. What's like a good
Ro-Mae-N lettuce.
Ro-Mae-N lettuce.
Ro-Mae.
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 Ro-Mae lettuce.
Ro-Mae-N.
Ro-Mae lettuce. Do you like Ro-Mae lettuce?
Yeah, I like all lettuce.
You like all lettuce? Oh, okay. Okay. I guess I better get on creating a podcast called Ro-Mae-N lettuce.
Yeah.
Are we gonna call it Ro-Mae-N or just Ro-Mae?
Ro-Mae-N.
Yeah. Fuck it, why not? Okay, so my phone storage does not like to agree with us. I guess if we don't like romaine lettuce, we will come up with another name. I guess we're just gonna see when this comes out in like 2 days what we're gonna call it. But other than that, thank you for listening to our yap session on Audre Lorde and Avatar and how they're connected. Thank you, Maeve, for joining me and helping me with my final project.
It was a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you, and I guess good night.
And good night.
Thank you and good night. Yay. Ah, bye boy. Bye boy. Bye boy.